What Ross Coulthart is asserting is that what's really happening there is that President Trump has now authorized the War Department to engage in shooting down UAPs. If, in fact, this is actually underway, then we, the American people, have now been made part and party to this absolutely criminal operation on the part of our government. This is so serious that this could actually be understood as an official act of war on the part of the United States against the ET craft and the beings there. If, in fact, it is demonstrated that our United States government and the White House now of Donald Trump is engaged in basically acts of war against an extraterrestrial civilization without any notice to the full Congress, then dramatic steps would have to be taken.
My name is Danny Sheehan. I'm a constitutional litigator who's worked some of the most important cases in modern American history. From Pentagon Papers, the Watergate scandal, to Iran-Contra. My legal career has led me now to this pivotal moment. As our human family confronts the implications of the existence here on our planet of extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional non-human species. I will be your guide as we dive into the profound philosophical, theological, and public policy questions pertaining to the UFO phenomenon, alien life, and the citizen movement for disclosure. This is the Full Disclosure Podcast, coming to you from the New Paradigm Institute on SpectraVision Radio.
This is the week that Congress, both the House and the Senate, have now gone home for the month of August. The Senate won't return until September 15th, and the House will come back into session on September 7th. The outstanding business that they're engaged in right now is campaigning for the election coming up on November 3rd. In the final primaries in the Republican and Democratic Party are being conducted here during the month of August. While they're all gone, however, the major UFO story that is still lingering is the outstanding presentation by Congressman Eric Burleson, inserting into the National Defense Authorization Act this remaining portion of the UAP Disclosure Act that was passed by the Senate way back in 2023, but has been awaiting a passage by the House and then later the Senate. This is the setting up of an independent review board to review the entire corpus of information that is in the hands of the executive branch pertaining to the UFO issue and the potential extraterrestrial civilization that is responsible for the UFO phenomenon. Those are issues that are now in front of the members of Congress. We're asking people throughout the Citizens for Disclosure movement to confront their candidates, all of the candidates from every single party and every single independent candidate for any of the 435 congressional district seats or for any of the 35 Senate seats that are up for re-election now, to confront these people and insist that they sign the pledge card, asserting that they will, if elected, pledge to support full disclosure of the UFO phenomenon. That's the issue that's still underway with regard to the government of the United States. However, there's an additional major UFO story that has developed just this week. Monday morning, on the 10th of August, Ross Coulthart, in his reality check program on News Nation, has issued this extraordinary report. He has asserted that his sources, whom he places total confidence in, have reported that President Donald Trump has now personally authorized the initiation of a secret U.S. Department of War department and the Department of National Intelligence campaign project to summon and shoot down UAPs. Now, this is all being conducted down by El Paso on the border with Mexico right now. And there have been some ruminations of something going on down there because of the ordering of the closing down of all the airspace around the El Paso airport, etc. But what Ross Coulthart is asserting, based on his reporting from his sources, is that what's really happening there is that President Trump has now authorized the Defense Department or the War Department now to engage in shooting down UAPs. This raises the fundamental problem of the attempted redefinition of the UFO issue as UAPs, because there's some suggestion that President Trump is being hoodwinked by some of his closest advisors in being led to believe that what they're really shooting down as UAPs are Chinese drones that are surveillance drones doing surveillance against White Sands and the other missile ranges down there. But the fact of the matter is that what's being attacked are UFOs that are engaged in increased surveillance around the White Sands proving grounds down there. And Ross is asserting that it's very possible that President Trump is intentionally giving orders to the Department of War to shoot down and capture these UFOs. They're being shot down or they're being hit by this pulse weapon, this electromagnetic pulse weapon that disables their navigation, forcing them to land, enabling Donald Trump now to recover the technology. And it's not clear what he intends to do with it, this information, whether he intends to use it for his own personal benefit or whether he's going to try to disclose this to the American people. But if he's being hoodwinked into believing that what's really being shot down or taken down are Chinese drones, whereas in fact they're UFOs, then there's a double problem here going on, is that the President of the United States is being deceived into pulling down UFOs from an extraterrestrial civilization. That's a double problem. But if, in fact, he knows what he's doing and he's actually attempting to bring down intact UFOs so as to recover the technology from these UFOs and put it to whatever use he chooses to do, that's an additional problem. Now, this is an extraordinarily important development. Ross Coulthart has reported that, in fact, Jake Barber and the other people who've been involved in the Skywatcher program, the reason that they've gone silent over the last year is that he's asserting that his sources are reporting that Jake Barber and the other people from the Skywatcher group have been recruited by the White House to actually participate in this effort with the Department of War to bring down the UFOs and capture the technology for Donald Trump. Now, this would be an extraordinarily important development, even though we know that the totally informal legacy program has been engaged in this conduct for years now, using the same technology to try to bring down these intact UFOs and capture their ET crew members. We know that this has been going on, but if in fact this now is being undertaken by the White House at the direction of the president and through the actual official Department of War or Department of Defense in the military of our United States government, this is an entirely different problem. So let me explain why this would be so different. We know that, as a matter of fact, for decades, this effort has been going on by the Legacy Group, as long as it was being conducted by some covert operation, which was not acknowledged by the United States and was actually being conducted by some quasi-private kind of coalition with the members of the Private Aerospace Corporation and other actions, but undertaken as a strictly covert operation in maintaining plausible deniability. We know that this has been going on since the passage of the National Security Act back in 1947. If, in fact, this now is being conducted by the White House and is actually underway, then we, the American people, have now been made part and party to this absolutely criminal operation on the part of our government. This is actually an entire different kettle of fish that we're dealing with here. This is an international criminal government operation that's being undertaken now with no plausible deniability to whatever advantage that fig leaf has been basically providing up to this particular point in time. This would make this an international official criminal activity, very similar to Germany's invasion of Poland back on September 1st of 1939. This started World War II. This is an entirely different type of government criminal operation that requires a very different response on the part of our citizenry. This is the subject of my full essay here this week. If in fact this program is now being undertaken, and the facade is being set aside of this being undertaken by some plausibly deniable operation, this would be an action on the part of Donald Trump, just one more activity of him blowing through the unwritten protocols, the so-called unacknowledged guidelines, informal guidelines that he's been blowing through for ever since he's been elected, either due to his ignorance of these kind of gentlemen's agreements as to how things are to be conducted. There was one time when the kind of things that Donald Trump has been engaged in as the president would never have been done, not because it's clearly and absolutely totally forbidden by the Constitution or any kind of judicial precedents, but the fact is that it's always been understood that that wouldn't be appropriate for him to do this. But if in fact he's doing this at this point, this would be even worse than simply initiating a congressionally unauthorized war against Iran, even if he's going to take the additional step of being in defiance of a ruling under the War Powers Act by both the House and the Senate, prohibiting him from engaging in any further military action against Iran unless he's given specific authorization to do so by Congress, which is presently underway. We're waiting to see if he's going to try to relaunch any military attacks against Iran now that the Senate and House have both voted to invoke the War Powers Act against him. So that this is so serious that this could actually be understood as kind of an official act of war on the part of the United States government, against the ET craft and the beings there. The way that we citizens would have to respond to this, if this is to be true, would be quite different. Because if in fact this was an activity being undertaken by some semi-private or independent group like the Legacy Group, we would be able to invoke the executive branch to engage in a criminal investigation against that group under the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act and undertake to prosecute these people for doing this. And if in fact, as Ross Coulthart reports, some key members of Congress have been informed that this is going on now, and if the Gang of Eight, for example, were to have been briefed on this and Congress has been compromised under the ruse that what's really being shot down here are just drones from China, whereas in fact, the operation is an operation to shoot down UFOs, and Congress knows that and is not doing anything about that yet. What we have to do is we need to mobilize the non-Gang of Eight members. The Gang of Eight are the people that are the heads of the intelligence agencies in the House and Senate and the Armed Services Committees in the House and Senate, along with the majority and minority leaders of the House and Senate. We're not talking about if they're engaged in shooting down Chinese drones. I mean, that's not an act of war if you do it like over your own territory. But if in fact they're engaged in this knowing activity against the UFO craft and their occupants, then we know that would be an actual act of war against this other civilization. So that what we're doing at the New Paradigm Institute is we're calling upon you now, if you haven't done so far, that you need to contact the newparadigminstitute.org and go to sign up members of the Citizens for Disclosure to bring this information to the attention of the candidates in the field right now. And you need to go to the August 10th episode of reality check with Ross Coulthart and watch this report. What we're doing here at the New Paradigm Institute is we're going to be getting in touch with Ross, ascertaining from him, to the extent to which he's willing to do so, who the sources are of this information, because we need to determine which of the two things we're dealing with here. Is this, in fact, Donald Trump knowingly and willfully directing the Department of War to shoot down and bring down UFOs, which he understands to be from some extraterrestrial civilization? If this is what's actually going on now, this is an extraordinary development, and that we need to take steps now to get this stopped. So I'm calling upon you here in this episode of Full Disclosure to reach out now to your elected representatives and to the candidates for all of the different offices in the House of Representatives and the Senate to bring this to their attention and do everything that you can do to support our New Paradigm Institute in the conducting of the kind of investigation that needs to be undertaken to ascertain whether this is actually taking place. I want you to take every step possible to follow up on this and to give us your support here at the New Paradigm Institute, and to give us the kind of resources that we need to conduct this extraordinarily important investigation. Go to the donor link. I don't usually go right after you to give us these funds, but I'm going to you right now. We're going to have to mount a major investigation here to ascertain whether this is true, and if it is, to move very aggressively on this right now. We're in communication with people at the Justice Department working on this complaint under the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act. But if this is true, and it's being now authorized by the President of the United States and being authorized and undertaken by the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence, there's some question about whether or not the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act could actually be deployed against them. Against them. Despite the seriousness of the request that I've just gotten through making to you, we do have a portion of our podcast each week now in which we're tending to answer questions that have come in from many of the people. Here's one that there's a number of people who asked this one. There's a lot of talk now about developing a higher level of consciousness specific to the ET beings and their capabilities. Could you please comment about this? This is obviously something that we've been talking about for some time, that there's every indication that the beings who are actually occupying the UFO craft are of a very high level of consciousness, that they are displaying various types of psychic capabilities that have been historically associated with the avatars that we've talked about, around whom the different religious traditions here on our planet in our human family have arisen. So therefore, there's this kind of spiritual overtone to the psychic capabilities that are being demonstrated by the ETs. This is a very important element of our New Paradigm Institute. As we've mentioned to you earlier, we are in this working alliance with IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, to study this particular aspect of the evolution of this faculty in our human species, pursuant to which we're able to engage in remote viewing, potential precognition, telepathic communication, even potential things like astral travel, etc., which is a strange function of the remote viewing. So all of these things are important aspects of this. And so we would direct your attention to the work of the New Paradigm Institute over and above, and in addition to, the effort to secure full disclosure about the UFO phenomenon. We're also engaged in taking the next step. What do we do once we've confirmed and gotten official confirmation from the U.S. government that this is actually going on, that there's actually an extraterrestrial civilization all around us, a non-human civilization, and that there are members of that civilization coming and going from our planet? What are they like? What capabilities do they have? What kind of explorations have they engaged in maybe many millions of years longer period that they've had to explore these fundamental questions that have beset our human family for millennia? This is one of the most important of all of those, and that is this issue of consciousness. Do we share a common consciousness with them such that we can communicate telepathically with them? in some meaningful way? And can we understand in some kind of a linear narrative what it is they've discovered about these profound questions? This is an extraordinarily important question, not only for us, but for the major religious institutions here on our planet, and what role they're going to play in this transition period between now and our establishing a new post-contact human worldview. But this is a very important question, and we are going to be addressing this in some detail, even though a substantial portion of our activities right now are directed towards securing the full disclosure of all of the information that our executive branch knows about the UFO phenomenon. And we are working hard now to investigate this extraordinarily important additional question of whether or not Donald Trump and this particular executive branch administration have also now moved to the point of actively engaging in military operations against the UFO craft. This is going to require another major focus of our institute, but we're not going to forego this additional exploration that we're engaged in with regard to the implications of the consciousness question. Okay, so that's an answer to one of the many questions you've been asking us. Please come back and see us next week on the New Paradigm Institute's Full Disclosure podcast.
To join the citizen movement for disclosure, visit newparadigminstitute.org/take action.